Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar, How Programmatic Powers Engaging Digital Out-of-Home Experiences. My name is Arda, and I'm part of the marketing team here at StackAdapt. And with that, I would like to hand it to our presenters to get us started. Over to you, Joe and Ryan.
Hi everyone, my name's Joe. I'm a team lead creative strategist here at StackAdapt. I'm part of the wider creative studio, so advising on all the ads and doing the production as well. We're a big team. We've got motion designers and production designers as well, kind of all behind the scenes. And I've been at StackAdapt now for about 20 months, but my background's in design. I come from a digital design agency before, and I'm now kind of applying all that knowledge to Programmatic. And over to Ryan.
Yeah, hi everyone, my name's Ryan. I'm one of the sales managers here at StackAdapt in the UK and have been for about just over a year as well, similar time to Joe. So my day-to-day, I'm working with agencies and advertisers on their programmatic strategy and recommendations. Before joining, I had spent about 8 years in contextual, so more on the display video side of things. But yeah, since joining, really enjoyed leveraging different targeting tactics as well as contextual, but also running across lots of different channels, including digital out of home that we're going to talk to you about today. For those of you on the call who have never spoken to anyone at StackAdapt before, if this is your first interaction with us, welcome. Just thought it'd be worth doing a very quick overview of who we are. So we are a self-serve multi-channel demand-side platform, a DSP. So we enable you to run your programmatic campaigns across display, native, video, connected TV, audio, digital out of home, and in-game. So truly execute those multi-channel, full funnel campaigns. As I mentioned, we are self-serve, so you have the power to have an account and be in charge of everything going on. But we do also offer a managed service too, which is also full funnel. So from creative strategizing, creative building, which Joe and his team are a part of, all the way through to campaign setup and campaign management. So if any of that does sound interesting and you want to reach out, please do so after the webinar. Just to quickly run you through the agenda we've got today. So we're going to do a very quick introduction on digital out of home and what it is. Joe's going to take us through some creative best practices and recommendations when it comes to digital out of home. We'll also run through what a full funnel strategy might look like. If you're like me, before joining StackAdapt and running a digital out of home campaign, I definitely would have put that as a upper funnel awareness tactic on its own. But there are definitely things we can do to drive those lower funnel KPIs as well. Then we'll just talk a little bit about what programmatic digital out of home looks like with StackAdapt, and hopefully have some time at the end to wrap up and answer any questions that you guys put in the chat. So yeah, I think with that, I'll stop rambling and give it to Joe to kick us off properly.
Cheers, Ryan. So starting off, an introduction to digital out of home. So what is digital out of home? Put simply, it's pretty much what it says on the tin. Digital out of home is advertising experience outside the home via screen or digital signage, and it's actually one of the most trusted channels out there. According to Vistar Media, who is one of our partners, 54% of people said they were very likely to believe the messaging in a digital out of home ad. And this might be because it's got such a rich history. So it dates all the way back, would you believe it, to the Egyptian times when they used to inscribe hieroglyphics on the side of mountains for travelers to give them directions. And then moving on to, Gutenberg and the printing press kind of gave rise to print as we know today, and even painting on the sides of buildings, painting murals for adverts when there wasn't much space in inner cities. And now we're at digital out of home. That brings us to what formats digital out of home takes. So as you can see, there are different formats, the first being the large format, so your billboards, your urban panels and street furniture like bus stops, your play space, so petrol stations, gyms, restaurants, that sort of thing. And then for more lower down the funnel techniques, at point of purchase, your retailers, casual diners, quick service restaurants, supermarkets as well. So coming to the differences between traditional out of home versus digital out of home. So digital out of home is real time and location targeted. So maybe there's a dress that's selling really well in Manchester. However, in London, a skirt is way outperforming the dress. So you can actually create an advert that's different in different locations. So you'll have a product image of the dress in Manchester, and you'll have a product image of the skirt in London. And you can switch those out really simply, maybe week to week if there's different bestsellers, or even day to day if you really wanted to. So that kind of brings me to the next point, which is quick activations with digital. Everything is super quick. You can do it in a matter of minutes. Whereas with traditional, I've worked in print before, and there's a lot more hoops that you have to jump through, whether that's, you know, getting your DPI right, making sure your crop marks are all in place and in the right place, making sure that your color systems are correct, and you know, sending them off to the printer, making sure they're getting everything correct and that there's no spelling or grammar mistakes. And believe me, it does happen. I've been there. And it's very costly as well to fix these mistakes. Whereas with digital, you know, you can fix those in a matter of minutes. And then moving on to the next one, digital is animated content. Obviously, you can do a lot more with animated. You can put in different frames. You can get sequential messaging as well. Static, you're a lot more limited with your retail space, so you can't do quite as much with it. Static has its benefits, but you do have a lot more limitation there. No long-term commitment. So with a lot of traditional out of home, you may have, you know, a month or 6 months minimum contracts that you need to sign. Whereas with digital, you can play around and move that advert where you want, when you want. So there's a lot more flexibility with your placements. I like to say it's a two-way communication. Maybe one day you have one message saying a certain thing, whereas the next day you can swap in a new message and push that consumer even further down the funnel, and know that they've likely seen the same creative, the same set of creative, because they're doing that commute every day. And then the next one, ability to measure and report on ad success, particularly pairing this with another channel. Brian will go into a bit more information later with an example. And user interaction, I will say this one's got a bit of caveat. Less digital out of home have user interaction, especially in the UK market, maybe more in the North American market. I do predict that in the coming years we will see more of this, but it's one to watch out for. And then retargeting capabilities. So we can use location data to collect device ID anonymously of people that have been exposed to a certain advert in like a certain area at a certain time, to then retarget them later on with, you know, a different channel. Maybe that's reusing their digital out of home as a CTV ad instead. And then finally, I mean, I've said this already, but flexibility. There's so much flexibility. Swap out creative mid-campaign, change up messaging, change up product imagery. There's a lot of strategy that you can put behind it with the amount of flexibility you have of digital out of home.
Cool. Even a little history lesson here. Very good. So over the past year, 18 months, we've even seen a huge increase in digital out of home for all those reasons Joe's mentioned. So this year it's actually set to account for about 64% of out of home spend in the UK, and by 2026 it's going to account for about £1 billion. So we, as well as the stuff that Joe's already talked about, a big reason for that as well has been that our lives are sort of back to normal after that thing that happened a couple of years ago that we don't want to talk about or remember. So office occupancy levels are back up, continuing to increase, as well as our commuter frequencies, and you know, the majority of us are back traveling as well. So that opens up a huge opportunity for a channel like Digital Out of Home to target users as they go about their daily lives, you know, not just on their devices, and target them when they're on their commute, maybe go to the gym, if they pop out for lunch, go shopping, something like that. So we've kind of already mentioned that whole multi-channel approach, and Digital at Home is just another part of that, enabling you to target users across all those different channels at different times of their day. And there are actually added benefits when it comes to programmatic as well. So one being that we are a one-stop shop for all of your digital out-of-home buys. We partner with about 18 different digital out-of-home suppliers. So you're able to come and access all of those through us. You wouldn't have to go to all of those directly if you wanted to. And that offers up a huge amount of flexibility as well when it comes to the targeting. So you're allowed to obviously access lots of different inventory suppliers simultaneously, potentially mix and match and pick and choose which screens you want to target. And you also might end up avoiding any high minimums or commitments that actually come with going with those partners directly. The third one there as well is we're able to utilize some of the audience targeting strategies and learnings that we've actually seen from other channels. So like Joe mentioned, we'll go into this in a bit more detail with a case study. But if you're running a display campaign, which geos, which creative messaging, etc., is working well, and then being able to apply that to your digital out-of-home campaign, which we are then able to measure holistically and optimize based on those learnings. So again, if we're seeing particular geos, creative, supply sources, screen types all working better, then we're able to optimize towards those as the campaign goes on. And I think I'll hand it over to Joe, who's going to run us through his creative expertise.
Yes, cheers, Ryan. So looking at digital out-of-home ad specs, obviously it's its own channel, so it has its own sizes as well. So these sizes probably cover about 90% of the screens out there. There are other dimensions and other sizes, so it's always worth checking that out beforehand before building your creative, because it does slightly vary depending on the inventory and the menu types. Well, what we have here is 1920 by 1080. Which is probably very familiar to everyone, your TV screen dimensions. And then flipping that on its side, you get the portrait 9 by 16, and also there's a 7 by 2 and a 4 by 3. So the ad types are twofold. Firstly, static. So we accept JPEGs, that's probably most standard. PNG as well, absolutely fine. Max file size, again, does depend on the partner, but 1 megabyte is roughly standard. Color space wise, RGB because it's light, but no worries if you've exported everything in CMYK, it's not a massive problem. Your campaign will still run, so don't worry about that. And then video, your output would be either a MOV or an MP4. And then the max file size is slightly higher, obviously, because it's animated, so 5 megabytes there. Again, worth double checking. And durations come in 6, 10, 15, and 30. I have seen more of the 6 and 10 slots with a lot of our partners, but what I always say is double check before you create anything to save yourself doing extra work that you don't need to do. So here is a video that was created by the Creative Studio. This brand gave us very little assets to work with, but I think we created something quite nice. So I'll just play that for you now. Great. So obviously it has its own best practices, digital out of home. So just running you through them now. Firstly, avoid white backgrounds. So some of you may know LED technology is additive, which means that if we're using all the colors are turned on, that makes a white color. Whereas if you're using just a red or a green or a blue, that's on its own. But actually white doesn't carry quite the same pop that those colors on their own do. So it's something to bear in mind. I mean, if your brand guidelines has white that features really heavily, that's obviously fine. But do try and involve some of those other brighter colors to really make it pop. Secondly, watch your font sizes, particularly on bigger locations like billboards. Users have very little time to see these ads, maybe like 5 seconds if they're driving past at tops. So you need to make sure that your text is large enough and that the weight is heavy enough, so the thickness of your text essentially. You want something that's quite bold and impactful, not too thin or people are not going to be able to read it. And on top of that, also contrast. Make sure your text and the background of your ad contrast enough so that they pass accessibility standards. So we always check those things when we're making ads at the Creative Studio. So we'll put it through something like a contrast checker, AA, AAA checker, just to make sure that, you know, they're as legible as possible. Time your color scheme. So, I mean, I think this one probably gets forgotten about a bit, but think about where your ads are going. What's the background going to be like? I mean, is it going up during the day or during the night? Obviously, during the day, you've got kind of like blue skies if you're on a billboard. So maybe a darker scheme with more rich colors is going to pop more. Whereas at night, you know, it's obviously a lot darker. Maybe consider those brighter pastel colors as well. That'll make that pop a bit more. And then looking at time and day with messaging as well. Maybe in the morning, your ad shows a breakfast meal supplement. Whereas, you know, on the commute home, that 5 to 7 slot, maybe you're targeting slightly different message. So maybe it's a parent coming home who has kids. So maybe you want to target like, I don't know, a family-sized lasagna. So just be a bit more smart with your time of day and what messaging you can use for that. This one always makes me laugh. Avoid button style CTAs. A lot of you may be pretty familiar with other channels such as display, where we do use and encourage button style CTAs, but that's because it clicks out somewhere, there's interactivity there, whereas a lot of these ad placements don't actually go anywhere. So I mean, we've probably all been that person that's gone up to a screen and started, you know, tapping mad at it thinking it's going to do something. I know I certainly have. And you kind of stand there feeling a little bit like a lemon because it's not going anywhere, it's not interactive. So, you know, we actually want to avoid that because it can negatively impact the brand if you're, you know, feeling a bit silly that you've done something that you shouldn't have because of a design style, because of a design choice. So for that reason, we don't want to confuse the consumer. You can still have a CTA, tell them try this now or go to this, or even use a QR code maybe, but just avoid the button style. And then finally, using a strong focal point. So using one element like a product shot or a picture of one person, maybe two, and making sure that your message is not too long and, you know, quite punchy. Anything that's too busy just isn't going to translate well. Again, think about how long people have to see this, to read it. That all comes into play. So just make sure you have one element that people can really focus on. So here's some examples. As you can see in the bottom right corner, we see the product image there on the right. We have the logo, which is nice and clear on the left, and then below it, a little bit of text describing what it is, and then the CTA below that. And then also point your attention to the left image with a QR code there at a point of purchase. So it's definitely something to consider adding in. It can add an extra bit of interactivity there, which can be nice. And then this slide shows some photos that I took. That's why the photography is not amazing. But I took these on my commute to work actually a couple of weeks ago. And I think it was probably like a 35-40-minute journey. And I passed a good 10+ pieces of digital out of home. So if you live in a city in particular, but anywhere really, this channel really is omnipresent. It's everywhere. That's one of the reasons why it's so well trusted, because people see it so much. So if you're not using it in your campaign, you really might be missing out. So moving on to my top creative takeaways. So number one, make sure you're customizing and designing for digital out of home. It's its own channel in its own right. Don't try and repurpose social or display and think it's going to perform the same or you know, better, because it's got its own best practices and methods of working. So just keeping those front of mind, go through, look at the best practices again, and make sure that you're ticking them off the list. Secondly, keep branding present throughout the ad. maybe I've seen that dress in Manchester and I see it on the billboard and I'm like, yes, I want it, but where do I go? I need to know where I'm going to get it. So making sure that your logo is present and really bold is key, really. And then finally, making sure your messaging is contextually relevant. Always have these questions top of your mind: who your audience, when is it going to be shown, where are they running, what kind of venue types. That's really going to help your design and make sure you're designing to the right audience and you're getting the most out of your campaign.
Nice. That's why we call you the creative guru, mate. So we're just going to spend a little bit of time talking about what a full funnel approach might look like through digital out of home. So really taking into account what Joe said there with the creatives, being careful with your messaging and that sort of thing. There are also targeting tactics that we can utilize to help drive some of those lower funnel KPIs too. So just a quick overview of some of the targeting tactics we have available. The first one being geography, so we can obviously set that at a country level, city level, town, postcode, radius, whatever it might be. Just depends on obviously your brand and what the objectives are, what stage of the funnel you want to really focus on, and we'll give some examples in a sec of upper, middle, and lower for all of these. The second one there is venue type. So again, being quite selective on the venue types you're targeting, what is the most relevant to the brand or again the target audience. So really concentrate on them and be as, I guess, personable as possible. Time of day, again, depending on the objective, but if you're wanting to really concentrate on awareness, for example, pushing ads during peak times for commuters or peak times that you've just seen really be associated with that target audience. And finally, we can make use of weather targeting. So where I am in Essex, it's nice and sunny at the moment, so I might be showing an ad with some relevant messaging and a relevant product like sunglasses, or actually for me it's probably sun cream. And Joe is based in London, so it might be grey and rainy there, not to stereotype London, but he might be served a completely different message and a different product, all part of the same campaign, and you can just make it personal in that way. So I guess like run through some examples of what these might look like at different stages of the funnel. So as we all know, top of the funnel is awareness. So we really recommend running like large screen formats in high traffic areas. So if you think about train stations and airports, they've got some pretty big screens in there. And then overlaying time of day targeting to target rush hour, for example, in train stations, you're really going to maximize the reach and hopefully push as much awareness as possible.
And then moving on to middle of the funnel, so coming to your consideration phase, this is the point where you maybe get a little bit more personal with your messaging, looking at maybe place-based venue types. So I'm a gym goer, not to brag. I love my cardio, so I do go on the treadmill quite a few times in a week. So whenever I'm doing a run, I always like to see what's going on with the digital out of home. Maybe it's because I work in the sector, who knows. But for example, I have my favorite gym brand wear that I'm always going to their website and I'm always buying the same brand. However, if I see an advert for a new brand of gym clothes and I see a promotion, maybe 20% off, maybe I see some more product information that it's like super sweat resistant or something like that, that might start to change my mind. I might see it and go, oh, okay, I'm going to go home and give that a little search and see what's up with it, and firmly push myself into the consideration phase. So place-based is really good for doing that.
Nice, yeah. And finally, the lower funnel. So again, probably not something I would have associated with digital out of home before joining StackAdapt or running a digital out of home campaign. There are definitely things we can do to push those lower funnel KPIs, particularly things like store visits. So again, being very particular and precise about the screens that you actually choose to target and being clever with the messaging will be really effective here. So if we pick a retail brand as an example, you might want to pick screens that are within a certain proximity of your store, whether that's on a high street or within an actual shopping centre. And then the messaging, You obviously say like, well, we have a sale on, our store is a 5-minute walk away. You could even have an image of a map showing where that location is. If it's in that shopping center, you know, we're in here, come find us on level whatever it is. So again, to really drive them user consideration to actually go into the store and visit, and if they see it and go, oh yeah, I'm actually going to go and pop in. And then finally, as Joe said earlier, we can include QR codes on the ads. So I guess from a creative perspective, we want those to be nice and visible. We want them to be always in the same spot on the ad. We need to give users that time to say, do I want to get my phone out? Give them time to get their phone out to actually scan it. I guess it's not something you really should be measuring digital out-of-home success on, but like Joe said, it's an option, so why not use it? Cool. So what does programmatic digital out-of-home look like with StackAdapt? Very simply, it's all CPM and impression based, so will fit in quite nicely with any existing programmatic strategies you have going on right now. And those CPMs and impressions are determined by something called an impression multiplier. So that takes into account lots of different factors like screen location, screen size, time of day, whatever it might be, to determine how many impressions are actually going to be served there. And a third-party vendor does this. It's not something we've made up. It's all vetted by a third party. And as an example, so a screen at Waterloo Station, a big screen in there at say 8:30 a.m. is going to have much more potential impressions because of that size screen, its location, and the time of day. And therefore, it's probably going to have a higher CPM versus a smaller screen at a point of purchase within a convenience store, maybe in a suburb in London at say like 11 a.m. just to go that extra bit. That's going to get much less foot traffic, less potential impressions, and therefore the CPM is probably going to be lower.
Cool. So what does digital out of home look like with StackAdapt? So we have a lot of media owners. We have 18 different media owners. So some of the really big boys like JC.co, Clear Channel, Ocean Outdoors, and that's 5.6K screens as well. So a massive amount of screens out there, 23 different venue types. So that's kind of like your cinemas, your restaurants, casinos, billboards, all of that. And then a 4.5 billion plus impressions, which, to be honest, I can't even really fathom that amount, but that's a hell of a lot of impressions.
Nice. And I guess like it's all well and good us talking about how good digital out of home is and doing it with StackAdapt, but you know, if you did run a campaign, what could you expect and what results might you see? And I have seen a question in the chat about search uplift, which this should hopefully answer. But yeah, we just wanted to run through a quick case study of a campaign we ran. So this is actually one I worked on with an agency called Digital Willow. So I think a couple of the guys signed up or on the call, so a big shout out to them. But really the objective of this was to raise awareness of the Isle of Man as a UK destination and for travellers. And what the guys had already been doing was running display activity, but they wanted to throw in another channel into the mix to see if there was any incremental uplift in awareness and search and things like that. So they chose digital out of home. And what they actually did was look at which units were performing best in terms of CTR and which geos, and then applied that to their digital out of home strategy. So they selected, I think, like the top 5, 6 cities that were sort of performing best across display. And then in each of those locations, the creative matched the display creative that was given the highest CTR. So the example here on the right is Extraordinary is only an hour away. That was potentially served in London, I think, because it's an hour from London to the Isle of Man. And that image matched the display unit that was achieving the high CTR in London. Whereas in Liverpool and Manchester, the messaging was completely different. It was only 30 minutes away, I think. And then the image was whatever sort of activity or tourist attraction was performing best in those locations. And what we saw were like really positive results. So we saw about 140% lift in CTR where we ran digital out of home and display. So that's a lift in display CTR. We saw a 66% reduction in CPA. And then what the guys also did was look at year-on-year data. So last year they only ran display. This year they ran display and digital out of home. and they actually saw a 263% increase in searches for the Isle of Man off the back of that. So yeah, I guess everything we sort of rambled through here, the whole multi-channel approach, full funnel approach, it's proof in the pudding. It really does work. It's definitely something to consider leveraging for campaigns. Cool, so I think that's probably us. I think we're just going to wrap up with a couple of points and then answer any questions that we've still got to answer in the chat. So our key takeaways are the main one being flexibility. I think we've said it a few times, but there is so much flexibility when it comes to targeting, creative, and also supply, accessing all different inventory pools through one source, and being able to pick and choose and cherry pick screens. Yeah, just a lot of flexibility and a lot of potential.
And then over to creative. So make sure you're designing specifically for digital out of home. It's its own channel. Follow the best practices outlined today, and you'll be sure to get the most out of your creative.
Yeah, and finally, don't discredit digital out of home from a full funnel approach. Again, I definitely would have had it as an upper funnel tactic, but there are definitely things we can do from a messaging, creative, and targeting perspective to drive some of those lower funnel KPIs that you might have. And I think that's it. We'll run through some questions and answer some.
Thank you, Joe and Ryan. I'll take it from here. So we now like to jump into the Q&A portion of the webinar and open up the floor to any questions you might have. As a reminder, if you have any questions, please place them in the questions box of the GoToWebinar panel. There are already several questions coming through, so just a heads up, if you're not able to get to yours today, not to worry. We will follow up with you directly after the webinar. So first question, this one is about the deck. How do I get access to the deck? We're glad you like our deck. The recording will be sent to all registrants via email after the webinar, and it will also be posted on YouTube later today. That's where you can access the deck. The second questions that we have, do you have any recommendations for B2B DOOH?
Yeah, I can take this one. So yes, so we can access actually office inventory, so screens within office buildings. If there are any specific offices, buildings you want to look at, definitely reach out to myself or your existing StackAdapt rep and we can give you that information. So that's definitely one way. And I did believe some suppliers can actually give us data on which types of businesses are within certain offices. So that could be some additional targeting that we can apply there. And also from a B2B perspective, just targeting around any events that are going on. So things potentially like the Excel Arena, targeting screens near there, or in a radius of that event. So as people are traveling to it, they can see your brand. And I guess as well, like from a financial brand perspective, you could target areas like Canary Wharf or Bank. Again, just being very selective in that targeting to make sure you're reaching your target audience. And even some financial brands actually sponsor sporting events and things like that. So again, if you wanted to be associated with those, again, you could target screens around the stadium and things like that.
Thank you, Ryan. Second question that we have, what DOOH ad format do you find most effective?
I'll jump in there if that's all right. Really, it depends on your KPIs and the goals of your campaigns. Different formats are suited better for different strategies. For example, the large formats ones are probably more better for brand awareness pieces where you're targeting a more generic audience, has a higher reach. Obviously, like a billboard, you're going to see a lot more people are going to see it than your lower down like point of purchase type ads. So really, I would say consult your creative strategist on those, tell them what your campaign KPIs are, and then we can make recommendations from there about kind of what placements, what venue types, and what formats would best be suited for your campaign.
Cool. Another interesting question that we have is, are there any measurement capabilities beyond impressions?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So yes, we are able to do things like foot traffic attribution. I will caveat it. I think it depends on a few things like geo. But again, if you want any other information on that, reach out to myself or your StackAdapt rep, and we can, figure things out. But we're always looking to improve our measurement capabilities. I think there's a few open beta tests going on right now where we're actively looking for partners to help us with those and test them. So again, if something like that is of interest to you, do reach out.
Thank you, Ryan. Another question. What other channels work best with DOH? Is display the best to pair it with?
Yeah, I can jump in for that one. Well, as a wise woman once told me, a multi-channel strategy is a winning strategy. So I think adding any channels to your strategy is never gonna negatively impact it. You want to follow the consumer where they are, kind of taking more of a holistic approach if you can, going device to device, and location to location. So really, adding display, yes, great. I mean, you could start your digital out of home as a brand awareness piece, and then have display more as a conversion piece, measuring like the CTR, etc., for conversions. However, you could also flip it and have like CTV as your prospecting piece, and take like the video completion rate. Maybe there's a certain area in the country that had a higher video completion rate, and then you want to target more place-based stuff in that location as a lower down the funnel technique, a consideration, or a point of purchase technique.
Thank you, Joe. Another question is, how specific can we be when selecting screens?
Yeah, I can go there. So you can be very specific. You can cherry pick, screen by screen if you wanted to. I guess a caveat with that is there's probably going to be minimums to doing that, just because there's a little bit of additional work from our side and the publisher side to get deals created in order to do that. But yes, if you wanted to only target, say, a handful of screens in a location specifically, that's completely possible. Obviously, again, things to consider a scale and that sort of thing as well. But yeah, we can work with you to make sure everything's okay with that.
Thank you. And for creative production, what is your standard turnaround for a DOH campaign?
Yeah, so for digital out of home, you're kind of looking at 3 to 4 weeks production time. Typically, we take 5 days to do the initial concept. We'll send that out to you and make sure we're happy. If there's any revisions, revisions take maybe 3 to 4 days, and then we'll build out the other sizes. Again, included in our package, we do 2 rounds of revisions. So we like to give it about 3 to 4 weeks just to make sure we're all safe, everyone's happy, we have time to feedback. So yeah.
Okay, great. And one last question, is animated DOH always better than static?
I can take that one. It's a bit of a complicated one. Obviously, having animation can really be impactful. It can be more engaging. You can put more frames in. You can have extra messaging, sequential messaging if you want. However, I will caveat that with it does depend on the place. For example, if you've got a billboard and you're driving down the road in 5 seconds of your time, you're not going to see like the animated all the different frames of that animation. So having something like a static in that place may be beneficial because you've only got that one message that needs to get across. Whereas something like a bus stop or a gym where people have a lot more time, they're there for at least a few minutes, having animated content might be a bit better there because they have time to read the whole thing and digest it. So really my answer would be it depends. Both are good, both have their place, but yeah, it depends where you want to place your ad.
Thank you, Joe. Amazing. So thank you so much once again, Joe and Ryan. And we have a lot more questions, but we have to wrap up. But if you haven't got to your question today, don't worry. We will follow up directly with you after the webinar. And that concludes today's webinar. I would like to thank you all for attending today. We hope you found it both informative and insightful. We will be sending out a follow-up email with the recording to all registrants, and please don't hesitate to reach out with any other questions you may have. And thank you again for joining us, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.